Talking all things Texas A&M Aggies spring football with our good friend David Nuño of TexAgs. Does a fantastic job day in, day out covering Texas A&M. Dave, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time as always.
Hey, Chris, I appreciate you, and sorry it's taken me a little while. It's been a crazy couple weeks here with a bunch of stuff happening, but happy to be here on the show and chit-chat about some Aggie football.
David, no problem at all, man. You guys have spring football going on. Texas A&M baseball's #1 in the country. I feel like in a few weeks we're going to have you back on to talk about that as the postseason gets closer. But like you said, right now, let's lock in on focus on Aggies football. Mike Elko, year one. What has the first spring practice been like for Mike Elko? Obviously, I think the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about what are the objectives in spring, it's all about instilling the fundamentals and your schemes and your systems. But also for Mike Elko, it's a culture change. It's about changing the culture and implementing your message to your football team, your identity, if you will. How has that gone, and what have you heard about that culture shift over the last couple of weeks?
Organized efficiency. That's really the main thing. Look, Jimbo Fisher was really good. I know the last few years have been terrible, but Jimbo was an extraordinary recruiter. And he was, past tense, a brilliant offensive mind, right? But one thing I don't think he was very organized, at least in the few years that I was here, with time, with efficiency, with maybe some of the personnel decisions that he made for his staff. So what I've noticed is a very efficient moving team, and things that you may not think matter, but do, like station to station, try to, getting a feel for that exact kind of cycle that they go through, what time practices, what time, meetings are. There's an expectation, a standard that has to be met. And if you don't meet it, then, you don't have to be here. It doesn't feel like they're going to, cut some corners just to keep people happy. The people are happy, though. That's the main thing. Last week when we talked to Coach Elko, they asked him about the portal. I'm sure we'll get into it here in a minute. And there's been some names that have gone in, but really nobody of substance has gone in. If you want to go back to December, obviously Evan Stewart, Walter Nolan, big names that moved on. And you can make a counter. You wish that you had that talent in the locker room. But you can also say that maybe you can figure out other ways to get that kind of production that you got from those guys in other areas. But all that being said, I just think it is a very efficient-looking team. It's a team that is no BS, and a team that really kind of has defined roles, defined expectations, and they're just starting to implement it. So, it's going to take a while, and they're not where they want to be. That's something that he has made apparent, but they're certainly looking like a team that at least has this plan that they're going to stick to and follow it through.
And David, you mentioned the transfer portal, and sure, some guys have left, but I think A&M did as good as anybody in the portal. You look at the rankings, you look at the sheer number of bodies, high-quality bodies they brought in. What's the integration of that talent been like, right? Any of these teams, whether it's Ole Miss, it's A&M, it's others out there, it's always a storyline when you can have a great roster, but having a great football team and having a large number of guys buy in like that, when you're flipping that many different spots, it can be a challenge, I would imagine, for Mike Elko, because it's all starting anew anyways, right? It maybe is a little bit easier for him. But what has that been like, not just getting the buy-in from the returners, but also getting buy-in from a bunch of brand new guys from the transfer portal that came from other schools?
I think the new guys is the easier one, right? You know what you're signing up for. You may not know because you haven't lived it, but you're signing up for something different. How about the guys who have been here a couple of years, right? The guys who had a certain lifestyle, a certain expectation under the Jimbo Fisher era. That, to me, has been the biggest transition. And some of the folks that have struggled to meet those demands are kind of the names that you've seen go in the portal. Some of those guys are guys that expected to play and now are realizing, man, I'm behind some dudes that are really qualified. So to me, when it's brand new, it's sure there's a transition to it. But the new guys, they're coming expecting something new. They're coming to go compete for a starting spot, competing for an SEC title, competing to get more draft profile. And that's why you've seen guys come here. And Coach Elko, especially on the defensive side, has proven his merit there at every stop he's been at. I mean, just in the last 10 years from Notre Dame to A&M to Duke, right? We've seen what he's been able to do. On the offensive side, I think people are really intrigued by Collin Klein and what that offense could look like. And how can you not be intrigued to have a quarterback like Connor Wigman when healthy? One of the top 5 quarterbacks in the SEC last year when he was healthy. There hasn't been enough of a sample set, so we definitely have to see more. He's only started in 8 games. But there's enough intrigue around there, and I think if your team leaders buy in, and by all indications they have, and if your coaching staff holds a standard, then you can transfer, I feel like 50 times in a semester, the way it feels like right now. So if it doesn't make sense for you, okay, we'll see you. But that's not been the vibe from the guys that you expect to be integral parts of this team.
David, you mentioned offensive coordinator Collin Klein, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Connor Wegman has been out this spring recovering from the injury, correct? He has missed the entire spring. He is out there. Okay. Excuse me then. My apologies.
Yeah, he's not 100%, but he's out there. He's certainly out there throwing, running a little bit. He is not where he wants to be. The injury, the foot injury, is taking him a little bit longer to get back to where he wants to be, but he's out there. I think the way Elko described it, like maybe 80% back, 85% back in that range. So he's there. He's learning the offense, just not doing everything like the Jalen Hendersons and the others are.
Okay. So there's not really a question then at the quarterback position because, of course, Connor Wegman, I agree with you, like you mentioned, he's at minimum a top half the league quarterback, top 5 more likely quarterback when healthy. The wide receiver position, though, you mentioned it's a new offense, everybody learning a new scheme, but when you lose a guy like Evan Stewart to Oregon, Anaya Smith also to the NFL, there's going to be question marks about productivity. Who's going to be the playmakers on the outside? You've got Troy transfer, Jabre Barber, La Tech transfer, Cyrus Allen, Jade Walker, Noah Thomas, Moose Muhammad, Mike Atiz. There's a bunch of guys that are back. What have you heard about the progression of not just the offense as a whole under Collin Klein, but that wide receiver position specifically? Have there been names that you guys have heard that have emerged over the last couple of weeks?
Well, first off, I want to take the Evan Stewart part because I think that's an interesting thing. So please understand where I'm coming from. I would like to have Evan Stewart's talent on this roster, right? He is a supreme talent, and he's probably going to do phenomenal at Oregon. I don't think A&M is missing that much. And let me explain to you why. I like the kid. Very nice kid. I don't think he's as productive. And a lot of it might have been the system he was in, okay? He wasn't as productive as I think we expected. And you could say, well, look at Jimbo Fisher is off. Sure. All fair. Jade Walker, the other guy you mentioned, let me tell you his stats. 35 catches, 590 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 16.9 average. Evan Stewart, 38 catches, 514 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a 13.5 average. I say that to you. You were able to get the same kind of numbers from Evan Stewart from a transfer last year in Jade Walker, who had a little bit of a slump in the middle of the season, then found his way at the end. Evan wasn't healthy or ready to go towards the end of the season, and we saw he also was in social media often kind of hinting his emotions, and that's kind of this culture, this young athlete culture. So, look, I wish Evan Stewart didn't transfer. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if you lose that much. If he goes to Oregon, catches 100 balls, and they win, a national championship, of course, I'll feel differently. But in the 2 years that he was here, and again, I recognize the offense was not great. But Anaya Smith put up some spectacular numbers in that offense. Anaya Smith was dependable. I don't know if Evan was that dependable, although an amazing talent that when he gets the right environment will probably do all the things we expected to see. It wasn't here. And again, so you talk about losing talent. They need to probably find an alpha wide receiver. But I think where they are right now, I really like. I don't love, I like. Moose Muhammad, when he plays, and did not play a lot for Jimbo Fisher the last couple of years, Moose Muhammad is a spectacular catcher, if you will, of the football. That's probably terrible English, but the guy makes spectacular plays. Every time he's on the field, he makes spectacular plays. His biggest mistake was, the sleeves at Ole Miss a couple years ago. The guy is phenomenal. So Moose Muhammad has a potential to have a much better season we've seen. I just gave you Jade Walker's numbers, right? And that was his first year in the SEC. He's growing as a wide receiver. Noah Thomas has been brilliant when healthy, also has had some injuries, right? Jabre Barber, he's going to be out for a while. Cyrus Allen, the La Tech transfer, he's got game-breaking speed and potential as well. There's a lot of unproven talent on that in that wide receiver room. I think they need an alpha, a dog, let's say, an Anaya Smith. But they have some nice pieces, right? They do have some nice pieces. That is an area that I would keep my eye on in the portal to see if they bring in somebody else. But the talent they have there, you lost a couple dudes, no doubt. But I think the guys you bring back are very nice receivers, and it's going to be a different Moose Muhammad, in my opinion, than you saw the last couple of years.
Now, David, switching sides of the football, let's go to the defense. And you know this, David, you're only as good as your guys up the middle, right? Interior defensive line, linebacker, your safeties. You got to be solid there. A&M loses Walter Nolan, like you mentioned. Edrin Cooper is gone to the NFL. You do return Torian York, who I would imagine is the leader of that defense The secondary gave Texas A&M headaches. What have you heard about this spring, guys that are stepping up, who are emerging? Because even watching in that bowl game, David, I mean, I noticed, and I think most others did as well, there's still a lot of talent on this defense, even if it's unknown right now. What's been the progression like of that unit over the last couple of weeks and all throughout spring ball?
Not worried at all about safety. You got some talent there. Bryce Anderson's phenomenal. He's been great for this program, and he played a little bit of nickel last year. He's not going to have to this year. So I feel really good about the safety spot. Dalton Brooks, Ricky Wright, who transferred. There's some names, that have been really nice. Cornerback is definitely a question. There's no doubt about that. But Tyreek Chappelle, who entered the portal momentarily, is back. So that helps. You also picked up some names, right? So can these guys, the BJ Mays of the world, these others that have come, Will Lee, who came from Kansas State, can these guys be an upgrade? And last year, the secondary was atrocious. You've got some new names. You've got some freshmen coming in that have some huge potential. It has to be. It's kind of like my co-host Olin was asking me, why is LSU's defense going to be better? Just because they got a new defensive coordinator? Well, I think that some new players and a new fresh philosophy, you expect it can't be worse. And the secondary last year was terrible. One of the things that we joke about on the show a little bit is like a lot of the receivers on A&M didn't turn around when balls were being thrown. I don't know if they were taught that or whatnot. Like, just turn around and make a couple of picks, right? Turn around, that great song. I think we'll see more of that, but it's a question mark. There's no doubt that is a question. But I think the way A&M is built on the defensive line helps that a little bit. Let's not forget, as much of a train wreck that A&M was last year, the 7-win team that they were. How many games did they get blown out? They didn't. Okay? How many were one-score games? They all were. Now, bad teams find ways to lose games, right? So that's not. It's more of an indictment than anything else. But Alabama, they were up considerably at the half, and they had a chance to win on the last possession. We can go through the list. Ole Miss, same deal, right? All these losses that they had an opportunity. LSU, they were beating them down. Oh, by the way, they lost their starting quarterback early in the year, the first SEC game. Jalen Henderson was unproven, comes in, does a miraculous job. Oh, and in the bowl game, they didn't win. They lost to Oklahoma State with their C team, not even B team. And their quarterback gets hurt on the second play of the game. Marcel Reed, who had taken barely any snaps, comes in. So I guess my point is, which I didn't answer the defensive question, but it's more of why I feel a little bit more confident. When you have new guys in place and you don't see some of the decisions that we've made, some of the predictive play calling that we came to see, it really wasn't Petrino's offense, but it kind of was. But on certain days, it felt like Jimbo's offense. On certain days, this is more of a spread. Defensively, I like DJ Durkin a lot, but for some reason, he loved the 3-man front more often than not. And with that kind of talent you have in the defensive line, I think you just go after the quarterback with your 4-man front and make it happen. And then you did mention Torian York. He is the team captain. They just announced their team captains a couple of days ago. Trey Zune on the offensive side, Torian York. That guy had a phenomenal freshman year. All that to answer about your cornerback spot, I don't know. They got some new guys, some guys with nice pedigree, some guys who have played at a high level, but they got to prove it. And that's what I think it is about A&M, and that's for the entire country. I can make an argument that this is a 9-10 win team. I think anybody can make that argument. When you look at their schedule, it's tough. You get a lot of those games at home. You can make that argument. But until I see an offensive line block for real, not what we've seen the last couple of years, and save your quarterback, until I see a quarterback, safe and not get to your fourth stringer again, right? Until I can see that, I understand the unknowns. But I think there's new pieces in place, new energy, and there's always been enough talent to be a really successful team at Texas A&M. Now, if you just have the right leadership, and I do think they have the right leadership, and I do like what they have on the defensive side. So I think there's a lot of moving parts to make you feel that the secondary will be better. How much better is the big question.
David, you got me fired up, ready to run through a brick wall, my friend. So I'm going to ask you this question, and this is in no way a shot at Jimbo Fisher. I want to make this very clear.
That means it's a shot.
But this is the first spring ball that you guys have covered over at TexAgs in quite a while that has a different voice, a different energy, and like you mentioned, that can be truly a shot in an arm for a program and a fan base. And again, you guys covering this thing day in, day out. What has that been like? How refreshing has it been for Texas A&M fans and those around the program? And, the excitement level, where is it at all throughout spring ball? Because, again, you get the new voice in Mike Elko. You have this new culture. It's kind of a new beginning. And you do still have a talented football team, a lot of talented players. What's that been like? What has the energy been like all throughout spring practice?
So let me take you through my mindset. I joined TexAgs in 21. Okay. I was working in Houston on local television there, and A&M's my alma mater, so of course I watched the games, but I didn't cover it the way I do now, right? So I was watching, and I saw the Jimbo trajectory, almost beating #1 Clemson, and finally breaking through, and could have been a college football playoff team. Some people think that they were robbed. I'm one of those who think they were robbed that year, but it didn't work out. You finish #4. You win the Orange Bowl. You feel really good about the trajectory. You start setting up the best recruiting class in the history of sports. It felt like this ascension, right? And then came the excuses by me, by people who covered this team, because they made sense. Well, your quarterback goes down in the second play of the second game of the season in Haynes King. So now you're playing with Zach Calzada. And Zach Calzada, let's be honest, was not very good. Was it the offense? Was it Zach? I don't know. He went other places and it didn't work out either. And I love Zach. He provided one of the best games ever. And he played hurt for most of that year if they had another quarterback. So you start making the excuses. Oh, you go 8-4. You should have had that LSU game, but you didn't. You were robbed of a bad call. Whatever. You lose. You're 8-4. No bowl game. You make the arguments in your head. This team is just a player or two away. 5-7 season happens. They were a player or two away in almost every game. It doesn't matter. They sucked. But you can, again, make the same argument. How many quarterbacks got hurt that year? They all got hurt, right? It happened again. And then Connor Wigman gives you a little lightning in the bottle at the end of the season. You beat LSU. Like, all right, that was Appalachian State happened. Absolutely. But look at what they're doing now. Then 22 happens. And the Miami game for me was when I was like, this ain't going to work. Right. And I wanted it to work because it was a lot of money. And I like Jimbo. Like, I felt like Jimbo just didn't evolve because, again, he didn't really play the portal game either. But he was such a good recruiter. But he let those recruits run, or those commits and those guys run the locker room in a way. And it just felt like, is this ever going to get fixed? And then in my mind, I'm like, I'm certainly critical of this program and the direction they're going. But I do see the excuses. You can't have 3 straight subpar seasons in the SEC and keep your job. You cannot continue to lose your starting quarterback every year that I've been back in College Station, and also lose your backup quarterback every year. Like, you cannot continue to do that. And I say that because Zach probably wouldn't have played in a bowl game in 2021 had they played in a bowl game, but they couldn't because of COVID. So you can't continue going that track. But then the contract. The $72 million. Oh, my God, what are we going to do? And then you're thinking, all it takes really is one more win, and Jimbo's here right now. If A&M beats Ole Miss like they could have at the end of that game, could have and should have, I think they were down, what was it, 19-0, 19-3, whatever it was early, and they came back and had a chance to tie or win at the end. If you win that game, Jimbo's still your coach, but they lose. And then they blow out Mississippi State, but he gets fired. And that's where the optimism comes from, okay? So in my mind, I'm trying to justify, dude, my kids are going to be like, I don't have any college-age kids yet. My oldest are in high school. I'm doing the math. 2030. They're going to have like families. And this dude's still going to be here. And if he's not going to evolve, what does that mean? So that's a long-winded answer again to tell you. The answer was always in front of you. When Coach Elko was here as a defensive coordinator, the vibe was, this guy's going to be a head coach one day. Wouldn't it be cool if he was here after Jimbo wins the national championship? Wouldn't that be cool? He goes to Duke. And you're like, man, he's winning at Duke? And then his second year at Duke, not as good as his first year. But Riley Leonard got hurt quite a bit, right? And they're still Duke. And you see what he is able to do. And then he gets to A&M and not only answers the questions, which does not mean anything. Somebody who can answer a press conference, it doesn't mean it. But it was refreshing the way he answered questions. And then you see how he reaches out to the Texas high school football coaches. And it doesn't feel it feels genuine the way he approached them. And the way he goes in his pickup truck and visits these guys. He doesn't have a team around him. He's just a good old boy in jeans and goes and meets with these high school coaches. And then you see the staff he puts together. Then he brings Tommy Moffitt as your strength and conditioning coach. Those of you who don't follow a lot of strength and conditioning, he's the only name people talk about in that world. There are others that are very good but Tommy Moffitt's like a legend. He's, the Moffitt method I remember hearing about his name, like, man, if A&M could ever get him. And he reaches out to A&M because he wants to get back into it. So you see all the new pieces. And Collin Klein, remember how the college football world reacted? Like, that's a pretty good hire right there. Holy smokes. Like, I didn't see that coming, right? And Jay Bateman and all these guys that you start adding to it, and Sean Spencer from Florida, and you start saying, well, he's got a staff. He's got some recruiting momentum. He lost some pieces, but those pieces seemed like they were out the door regardless of who the coach was. Felt that way. It felt that way with Jimbo. None of us were surprised that Evan or Walter went into the portal. None of us were surprised. So you see a breath of fresh air. You see discipline. You see all these things, and it just feels right for a guy that's kind of your own, who'd been here during one of your most successful years in the last 15, 20 years, right? He was here for that Orange Bowl season. So, yeah, breath of fresh air, new vibe. What we see on Saturday, look, everybody on our show is like, you got to prove it to me, but I like what I'm seeing right now. And until I see an offensive line that gels, and by the way, that was one of the biggest things that, to me, A&M's biggest issue wasn't their offense. It was their offensive line, okay? And Steve Adazio was a legend before. It just didn't work here. That offensive line got worse. Bryce Foster was all freshman SEC center his freshman year, was not that. I know he got hurt, but he wasn't that. Ruben Fatherby, the same thing. Adam Cushing seems to be doing it right. They're getting some recruits out the park, continuing what Jimbo was doing. And I think it's a different voice. So, yeah, I think I'm kind of long-winded answering your question again, but we're in a good spot.
Mm-hmm. David, last thing, and we'll get you out of here. You mentioned the Maroon and White game will take place this weekend at Kyle Field, of course, the annual spring game. What are you most excited to see? What are you most looking forward to? And what do you think this fan base most wants to see? I mean, again, it's a dangerous thing to try to draw conclusions from a spring game, but of course, a lot of positives can come from it.
You know, I've reached the point. The spring game is just a celebration of football. And we're like, there's nothing I'm going to get out of this game that's going to make me feel one way or another. They're still implementing the offense. I don't even know if Connor Wigman's going to be able to go. If he is able to go, how much is he able to go? If they throw a bunch of touchdowns, am I all of a sudden going to think, hey, the offense is fixed? No, I won't know that until Notre Dame to start the season, right? So what I'm looking forward to is seeing how they go about their business, the communication, how the offensive line maybe is gelling, and maybe showcasing some of this talent that I haven't seen, right? The Will Lees of the world. Some of these guys, I know what Ruben Fatherby can be. I hope Ruben Owens can be at running back. I want to see him take another step, but I have a pretty good feel of the direction he's going, Le'Veon Moss. I know who Moose Muhammad is, but I want to see these new pieces. To me, that's the important part. The offensive line, it's the most boring part to watch, but I'm intrigued by it right now because without the offensive line, this team has no chance. That's what. Oh, and I'll tell you what, I'm excited to see the Nick Scorton, the Big Ten sack leader, right? Like coming to A&M, coming back home. He's from Bryan. I'm excited to see what he's able to do. Not that he's going to get a bunch of sacks in a spring game, but I just want to see him up close and personal and get a feel for it.
David Nuño of TexAgs does a fantastic job for those guys day in, day out, covering the Texas A&M Aggies. David, always a pleasure, my friend. Let's definitely do this again soon.
You got it, brother. Thanks so much for having me.